Good afternoon, everybody, depending on which part of the country you are joining us from. Maybe it's good evening for you. Welcome to our presentation, Adapting Services During COVID-19, Innovative Approaches in Addressing Immigrant Unemployment and Underemployment Across Canada. So joining me today for this presentation are our four speakers, and they are from across Canada. So from St. John, New Brunswick, we have Mohammed Baga. From Toronto, we have Yilmaz Dinch and Chidima Egahaga. From Vancouver, Daisy Kwan. And I am the chair of this session. My name is Sabina Michael, and I'm also from Toronto. So before we get started, I thought I would remind everybody, if you're joining the conference later today, that there is a there's a place where you can post your questions. So click on slido.com. The conference code is P2P 2020, and make sure that you select this session. There are multiple workshops running at the same time, and so there is a Slido for each workshop. So if you click on the tabs at the top, this is the first workshop, so we are fairly easy to find. We are the first workshop, and it's marked there. At any time, feel free to pose your questions. In a moment, I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves and their organizations. So this workshop is a panel discussion. And what we will do is I'll have the panelists take turns answering some of the questions that we've prepared. But anytime in the conversation, please feel free to send us your questions through Slido, and I will monitor Slido through the discussions. So if you see me looking away, it's not because I'm not paying attention. I have multiple screens here, and I'm looking at the questions that may pop up. My colleague Joanne Lee will share slides for this session. So we've added slides where it's relevant. So answers where it is relevant to add slides, we have slides in there. But for certain questions where we are building off each other's contributions, there are no slides. And at that point, you will see the title slide again. So if you see a speaker saying something and there's no relevant slide, there will be a title slide. And it's not because Joanne has forgotten which slides to show, it's that there will be a title slide there. So if you're ready, we'll get started. And I would first like to introduce and invite Daisy to tell us a little bit about herself and the organization.
Thank you very much, Sabina. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Daisy Kwan. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs and Stakeholder Relations at the Immigrant Employment Council of BC. We're based in Vancouver, although we do have a provincial mandate. And we're part of a network of 8 immigrant employment councils across Canada. IECBC's mission is to be employer-facing, and essentially we work with employers to help them better connect with, hire, retain, develop immigrant talent, as well as to provide initiatives, resources, and supports to build more diverse and inclusive workplaces. Thank you.
My name is Yilmaz Dinch. I'm the Research and Evaluation Manager of Toronto Region Immigrant Employment Council, Triac in short. Similar to Immigrant Employment Council of British Columbia, we are working towards ensuring that the full range of skills and competencies that immigrants bring to Canada are fully utilized and leveraged. So we create and champion solutions towards immigrant inclusion in the labor market with the GTA, and we work also with employers to ensure that they create the immigrant inclusive workplaces that in turn advances their bottom line and provides more meaningful opportunities to newcomers and immigrants who help Canada grow and drive the inclusion agenda further.
So the next speaker that we have is Chidima. When I invited Chidima to speak at this conference, I think I told her, you're representing many groups here, Chidima. You're representing the Professional Immigrant Network that you are a member of, but you're also representing many immigrants to talk about your journey here as an immigrant and how you have found success here in Canada, but also as a mother managing home and work and 3 children, and how you have managed to put it all together and make sure that you are present and engaged with the various groups that you are working with. So over to you, Chidima.
Yeah, thanks for the kind introduction, Sabina. Like you rightly said, I'm here wearing many hats. I'm an immigrant who has been here for 4 years. I'm a proud mother of 3 kids. I'm also an accountant working with one of the big top 5 banks in Canada. I'm here also representing the Black Female Accountants Network, which is a volunteer-run network and a member of the Triac Pink Network. Our mission in Black Female Accountants is to promote the visibility and representation of Black females in finance and accounting. We do this by creating opportunities for our members to help each other through sharing knowledge and experience. This helps them to build the confidence that they need to stand as leaders in every stage of their career journey, be they students, new graduates, early in career, or established professionals. Thank you.
Thanks, Chidima. So, and our next speaker is Mohammed Baga from New Brunswick. So over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you, Sabina, and thank you for the invitation. I really am very grateful to be here to introduce the St. John Newcomer Center. So our mission is to improve the cultural, social, and economic well-being, as you can read on the screen. We really, truly live by this, that we want to promote multiculturalism and newcomer settlement in our region. We also strive to see everyone in our community embrace the values contributed by newcomers, both in every aspect of their life. We are the first stop shop for many newcomers. As you can see in the photograph, we host a wide variety of programs and services within St. John. And my role here at the center is I manage the center. I'm the managing director of the St. John Newcomer Center. Thank you, Sabina, again, and I look forward to this great discussion.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Before I shoot off the first question, I will take a few minutes to talk about what I do. I work with the Intercultural Skills Lab here at Rotman, the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. And what we do is we are a platform and resource, and we support in both individuals and organizations to develop their intercultural skills competencies. And we offer different kinds of programs. We have programs for individuals. We have the Business Edge Campus and the Business Edge Digital program. We also have customized programs for employers called Culture Counts. And if you have visited the conference and our booth today, you would have had the opportunity to test our new cultural assessment tool that we just did a soft launch for today, just for the conference. It's called Maple. And if you haven't tried it, we'd love to have everybody try it and give us your feedback. So let me get started with the first question. And this question is for you, Ilmaz. Maybe we'll start with you. So tell us about some of the challenges that you have observed around the impact of COVID-19 on immigrant talent.
Thank you, Sabina. As we all know, COVID has turned the market upside down. The economy has been facing challenges since the beginning of the outbreak. We have seen waves of lockdowns, and the challenge is still out there. It's still evolving. So any insights and research that we share, it still continues to change and evolve as we speak. So initially, one of the recent forecasts showed that Canada's economy is expected to contract 6.6% in 2020. But this doesn't take into account the recent lockdowns in metropolitan centers like Toronto and Peel. So we know that the effects might be much more significant than even this forecast that Conference Board of Canada put out. At the same time, we have seen how the crisis has affected immigrants. Newcomers especially have been more vulnerable to unemployment and underemployment challenges during the pandemic. For instance, during the first lockdown from February to May, the number of newcomers in employment declined by almost 22.6%, much higher than what people born in Canada has faced. And when you actually take into intersectional perspectives into account, meaning the challenges that people face, not just because they are immigrants, but because of their gender, because of their sexual orientation, because of their ethnicity, these challenges become much more complex and much more harder to overcome. Take immigrant women, for instance. Those with university degrees had among the highest unemployment rates in May, more than women born in Canada, men born in Canada, as well as immigrant men themselves. And we know how the crisis has affected women disproportionately. So on top of that, being an immigrant makes the challenges that you face in the labor market much more severe. Next slide, please. At the same time, what makes it difficult to advance the immigrant inclusion in the labor market during this time is immigrant talent slipped down the list of employer priorities during the lockdown because they had to pay attention to all the how their operations has been affected by the pandemic, what kind of measures they have to take. They stopped hiring, hiring freezes were the discussion back in the spring. But fortunately enough, not all sectors were equally affected. We have seen the pandemic-induced demand has created some jobs, for instance, in e-commerce. And one of the most prominent examples was actually in long-term care, showing exactly why Canada needs immigrants. Many immigrants filled essential roles during the pandemic, and 36% of nurse aides and patient service associates across Canada are in long-term care. And in metropolitan centers like Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary, this rate goes as high as 70 to 80%. So this shows why immigrant talent is so crucial, even during times of difficulty and times of uncertainty. Next slide, please. We have also seen, from the first lockdown till what we are facing today, the recovery process started on. But unfortunately, the number of full-time jobs, the recovery of full-time jobs was much more slower than part-time jobs. And this was especially true for immigrants. For instance, employees born in Canada from April to August recovered around 86% of the jobs lost. But during the same period, immigrants have only recovered 60%. And the rates are exactly the opposite when you look at part-time jobs. So the growth of jobs for immigrants was much more faster on the precarious front. And this is really an alarming trend that if the pandemic continues to affect our economy in a way that it does, we will see more precarious work, more newcomers being affected, more newcomer women facing challenges such as unemployment and underemployment. Now, there are other trends that we also have to take into account. One of them is the talent crunch that the employers are going to face. This year, even under the most optimistic scenario, Canada is only going to admit 70% of the permanent residents that it was targeting. Now, we know that the government has committed to accept more immigrants over the next 3 years and allowing around 1.2 million new permanent residents to join Canada's labor market and Canada's population. It still remains a big challenge with the lockdowns that how much of this of the percentage of these targeted numbers will actually end up coming to Canada, will be able to transition to the labor market. So these will be big challenges that we will continue to face, even if vaccines are developed and even if we are ready to go back to the office in a couple of months.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. I mean, this conference, we've had a number of organizations share some of the research that they have done during this time. And I think the biggest impact has been felt in the immigrant sector in terms of not just job loss, but what the recovery will look like. So thank you for sharing those stats. So I'm actually going to ask you now the same question, Mohammed. What were some of the challenges that you've observed? I mean, we just spoke a little bit a while ago where, I think New Brunswick was fairly safe during the first wave, but things are beginning to change there. So tell us a little bit more about what are the challenges that you have seen on immigrant talent in your region.
Thank you, Sabina. So sure, I'll really speak to from a perspective of observations and from a perspective of what is happening on the ground here in St. John. And it really relates to the macro picture that Yilmaz just spoke to. I think it is very, very real. So one of the things that we have seen within our organization is, in spite of newcomers, like the number of newcomers who are seeking employment related services has drastically increased. Newcomers who would normally not use our services, we are seeing them coming to the center or coming to the organization, trying to access those type of services. And most of them are highly qualified. Most of them are also job ready. And this really showcases the trends that, the amount of layoffs that may have happened during the pandemic, or new arrivals towards the end of January or early February were seeing that the need to find employment. So that's one area. The other challenge, what we are also seeing is the number of jobs that are being advertised has been drastically up over time. So, you may think it's a mismatch, right? You've got all these jobs that are there, and then we have all these newcomers who want to work, and yet they are not matching. So that's one of the things that what we have identified through the process is it's not always the talent is there. It's just that how we can match it to the right opportunities. So that's one of the areas that we have been pivoting our organization to new programming so we can address the employment needs in such a manner. From a micro unemployment perspective, we have also seen unemployment rise, and it has risen from 9.75% in April to 11.7%, which was the worst in July, and it is going back. It is stabilizing a little more as things opened up after the first wave in the summer. So I'm also kind of worried that most of the jobs, most of the industries that were impacted were in industries that would normally hire newcomers,
Yes.
the retail-facing industries, client-facing industries such as retail and the hospitality businesses that would hire a lot of international students and hire those who have arrived as with lower skills. So that there is an impact, and the food supply chain is where we see more, in the farming and in the food processing is where most of the jobs are becoming available. So it's not a bad picture, but it's not a entirely good picture either.
Yeah, absolutely, and yes, and I think we've seen that consistently across the country, right? There are jobs being lost, but there are jobs being created in other industries or sectors, and sometimes it requires being agile and nimble and moving quickly, to find those opportunities. So I'm actually now going to maybe shift gears a bit and ask you, Daisy. You work very closely with employers. So what was your experience like in the last 6 months? Were there any notable shifts you noticed or anything that actually surprised you in your work with employers?
So I would say that I would agree with Yilmaz that certainly kind of the whole immigrant talent space has diminished in terms of priorities for some employers. However, that being said, what we have seen those continued active recruitment within the tech sector, as well as what we've called essential services. So could we move to the next slide, please? So, I mean, the context, I know this won't be any surprise to anyone, but I think it's important to note this because this kind of frames the overall kind of narrative and what we're observing on the ground. And I just want to stress, this is based on our organizational and my personal observations. I'm certainly not speaking for employer experiences across the country. But what we've observed is, yes, definitely there has been a lower level of employer engagement, in part because, as Yilmaz said, they have other priorities. But we also know that there always tends to be some degree of what we call employer fatigue. Then you add on to that the layer of the uncertainty that comes with COVID-19, which has already been addressed. Then you also add to that further, the limited resources or shifting priorities around D&I, because I know personally we have an employer advisory group comprised of 24 talent acquisition / D&I leaders among 14 different companies. And many of those folks have been redeployed into other areas, for example, to look at kind of a COVID-19 back to work transition plan, for example. And then you layer that on to, the kind of bubble, the below the surface, the anti-immigrant sentiments. So that being said, what we've heard from employers is that they're definitely looking, there's been a hiring freeze for most employers other than essential services and tech industries, or they're actually focusing on bringing back people that have been laid off. But what we found was also very interesting too is, and this is just, again, our observations, is that within the essential services, so like what we call even the Amazons of the world, the kind of positions, it goes back to some, I think Mohammed mentioned up the skills match, the positions that newcomers are being offered or they're open to tend to be more at a junior level. So again, they're not looking at reaching out to, say, tech folks or, full stack developers. They're looking for people to work in the warehouse. With the tech companies too, what we've observed, and we know that tech sectors tend to be one of the most progressive sectors in terms of D&I and really looking at how they and their hiring practices. But we've also observed that in this particular period, I think their level of risk tolerance has decreased, and as a result, the requirements that they're asking for newcomers has increased. Next slide, please. So you have to, you've got layer upon layer. So we know that there's pervasive employment barriers related to Canadian experience, employers not really understanding or devaluing international credentials and experience, and then newcomers not necessarily having access to the local networks. So I'll speak later about how we've actually responded to what we've seen on the ground and heard from employers, and what we've done to try and mitigate or address some of the issues or the concerns that we've heard. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe I'll ask you now, Ilmaz, because Triac, right? At Triac, you have a huge base of employers and you work with them through many initiatives. So what are some of the stories that you are hearing at this time?
Thank you, Sabina. And can we have the next slide, please? I think it's really important, looking at the outbreak and what has come after, there were really two stages of employer engagement. The first stage was when they were first trying to understand what would be the pandemic's impact, where we have seen restructuring, layoffs, and hiring freezes. And definitely that had a big impact on newcomers and immigrants, as I shared the statistics on how newcomer employment was affected. But then there was a second stage, especially this would be the period from the first lockdown till what we are experiencing now, where there was a renewed focus on diversity and inclusion. And this really started with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd and the overall discussion about what can we do about the rise of anti-Black racism. This really gave an opportunity to employers in the GTA to think about how do we commit to inclusion, and most importantly, how do we make a difference? We have seen many CEOs of companies based in the GTA coming out and acknowledging the problem and addressing the need to act. Well, we don't know yet how much of this rhetoric will actually turn to action and impact, and that's really important to see. But at least, based on the inquiries we get at Triac from employers in terms of how can I build an inclusive organization, how can I work with immigrant talent, that has been something that we could work with to move the needle, both in terms of inclusion and better utilizing the skills that immigrants bring. Now, at the same time, employers, because of the talent crunch, the number of permanent residents coming is decreasing, are increasingly focusing on internal hiring. And that might be an opportunity for immigrants, because many immigrants are underemployed and have wide range of underutilized skills. If you are able to match the needs of the employers with the skills that immigrants already have but are not utilized, this will help immigrants to get more commensurate opportunities. This will help employers to address their skills shortages, and it will be a win-win situation for everyone involved and help Canada's economy to recover better. And again, this is something that I highlight in all of the event engagements that I'm speaking. Skills shortages still persist. The pandemic is going to be over one day, although it doesn't feel like it, and then employers will keep looking for talent. Right before the outbreak, half of Canadian employers stated in a survey by Manpower that they can't find the workers that they need. This is not going to disappear. And to address that need, we really need to rely on immigrants, and that fact is not going to change.
And thank you. And you make a very important point here about the fact that there is a skills shortage, and we've heard about it for many years, and we've all been preparing for it. In fact, many of our programs are designed to address skills shortage in specific areas, and so that's why you have bridging programs or programs that are very sector specific. So I think when the pandemic started, for many of us, it created some interesting dynamics in the way we deliver our services. I know all of us moved online very quickly, and then it was challenging, but at some point that we had to do that. And some of these changes were very difficult, right? As a program service providers, some of us are limited by the budgets we have. We are limited by the opportunities we have, or including even the areas where we can serve or not serve. So I was very curious, and I'll maybe ask a couple of you this question. What kind of opportunities did the pandemic actually pose to your employment programming initiatives? Did you conceptualize new ideas? Did you design new initiatives? And maybe I'll start with you, Daisy, here. So what were some of the new things that your organization started delivering?
So thank you. So of course we moved, we shifted completely to a virtual platform, but it did present some unique opportunities. So I'm just going to actually ask, Joanne, could you please? Yeah, so it provided an opportunity to really step back and reflect. And I said, we have the good fortune of having an employer advisory group that's very engaged. And as I said, they represent over 14 different companies. And so what we found is that there was absolutely an opportunity to really leverage technology, right? And with a focus on what we call virtual networking and a focus on soft skills. So employers were more willing to engage because it was low touch, being virtual. The logistics were minimal, right? And the time commitment was minimal, unlike where you have in-person events. So could we go to the next slide, please? Joanne? Yeah. So really what we did is we took this opportunity to really work with employers and to talk about how we could use this time and the virtual platforms to really focus on a shift from what we call credentials to competencies. So if you think about one of the slides where I talked about pervasive employment barriers, and two of those being the lack of Canadian experience, quote unquote, and the second being the lack of understanding and devaluing of international training experience. What we found with employers that there really was an opportunity to really move the needle around shifting from credentials to competencies. And we did that via virtual events. So what we called connections events, ranging from speed networking to soft recruiting to kind of a hackathon. The other thing that we also heard loud and clear from employers in this new context, that it was really important for services to support newcomers to better translate their competencies into the local context of the occupation and the language that employers understood. But also ultimately what we realize is that it's both an art and a science. So we appeal to employers' hearts and minds. So we made the human connection, albeit virtually, and then we really focused on helping them to understand the value that newcomers can bring to the workplace, as well as newcomers, by virtue of their interactions with employers, also were able to demonstrate, quote unquote, their value. So this again really required us, and if there's kind of one message that folks leave with is really, and I know it's not a new message, but really around partnerships, because we could not achieve what we did and we could not achieve economies of scale without partnerships. But what was also really interesting, it wasn't always the usual suspect. So in the sector, we talk about partnerships being with other community organizations, to some degree academic institutions, maybe some business associations, but we really had this opportunity to focus on post-secondary, municipalities, which depending on which part of the country you are, they play a bigger or lesser role. And also like with companies, say like with virtual reality and artificial intelligence, because given that everything is online, it really presented some new opportunities for us. But I really want to stress that the focus really was on addressing like two areas, which was really around the virtual networking on both sides of the equations with employers and newcomers, as well as being able to look at soft skills, embedding that more strongly, again, using AI or VR, and also use of technology. Next slide, please. So, sorry, yes, this side. So a couple examples, as I talked about, we are working with a startup company in Vancouver, and they developed an app called Be Confident, which is essentially using AI and VR to help newcomers prepare for interviews, and they can do this in the comfort of their home, which was a direct response. Now that most organizations either shut down services or significantly reduce services, there was a need and an opportunity for newcomers to actually embark upon services online. So again, this app's called Be Confident. It's actually in the beta phase now, and it's really to help newcomers in the privacy of their own home practice their interview skills with AI and VR. So there's actually a person, an artificial intelligence person, who responds to the newcomers' answers. And then again, I talked about virtual connections events, and also this really interesting. Mohammed talked about the skills mismatch, and I mean, we could take a whole hour to talk about that in and of itself. But what was a really interesting observation for us is that, tech companies continue to say they're hiring. So we would be working with service delivery partners, schools, and we would be referring newcomers that had been vetted, very highly skilled, but yet the employment outcomes are still so low. And we're like, why is this, right? Because the resumes were screened by subject matter experts, the folks had all the hard skills. And what it boiled down to, at least from the employer's perspective, is there was a lack of the kind of soft essential skills that they were looking for. So what we said is, but there's all these kind of programs out there that help newcomers with around employment readiness, employment preparation. What is the issue here? The long and short of it, what we really realize is that we need to really clearly understand from hiring managers, talent acquisition folks, how they define soft skills. Those are often so nuanced, or they're so subtle, that even for the folks that are born and raised in Canada, speak this language, it's an adjustment to understand the new workplace culture. So what we're doing, one of the new initiatives that we're looking at is actually what we're calling a tech boot camp, where we're really actually unpacking what it is that employers are looking for, how they're really defining soft skills, to what extent does unconscious bias also play into that, unpacking all that, and then having employers actually lead boot camps where they articulate that to newcomers, and they also do coaching. So that's just in a nutshell, a couple of opportunities that came up. So, gift and shadow. In the midst of chaos, there's always opportunities.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So you raised a very important point about soft skills or essential skills, and whatever that you may choose to call it. And it's very interesting because the reality is that it's also sector specific, right? Yeah. Each sector values a different set of soft skills, and so when we are designing programming, sometimes it just becomes so much harder to tell somebody or to explain to them what the nuances are. I'm actually going to turn to Chidima here. Chidima, we haven't had you speak yet. You are a very active member in some of the professional immigrant networks. So what are kind of some of the initiatives that you have launched as a professional immigrant network that would support people during this time of virtual ways of living?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Just same as has already been shared by Daisy, Yilmaz, and Mohammed, we found out that given the restrictions we had with COVID, we kind of had to pivot our programming from mostly in person to a virtual state of delivery. And the interesting thing is, I like the point that Daisy said, where she said, like, everyone is going virtual now. And when we turn our programming virtual, it's not just like we're kind of preparing our members for the real world out there, whether or not they're working. And it's interesting to know that even when you're working, it's different when you're working in person, like in the office, and virtual. The challenges are so different. And as the new immigrants come in and they're getting used to doing things virtually, it actually gives them an edge. So I see it as a two-way thing. Like, it seems like we had to switch our programming because of a problem, but then that switch actually is giving the immigrants an edge. Because now they're going, imagine getting a new job where you don't even get to meet your co-workers, like your teammates. Everything is virtual. But now, because all the programming from even the employment agencies and everything is virtual, they're getting used to meeting people for the first time face to face through Zoom. They're learning competencies of how to conduct meetings over WebEx, over Zoom, and these are things that they will need to become to be more effective at work. And what we're finding as we put on this programming is that people are getting more confident. I like what Daisy said, where you're actually practicing in the comfort of your home. It's not like you're going outside to somewhere else. You're in the comfort of your home. So I would say that the barriers to learning are reduced because you're more in your comfort zone. You can come into that learning environment with the whole of who you are. And that's what we're leveraging on, in the Black Female Accountants Network. We have sessions where we're not even just speaking only to the technical side of things. We're also teaching soft skills, things like mental health awareness. How can you connect to the person you're speaking with? How can you ask a question that shows the person that you see the person as a person, not just as a potential employer? How can you develop those skills virtually? Because there are cues you read when you see someone in person. You have to now know how to translate that to a virtual world. Those are the things that will make you successful, both when you get a job and when you're also having an interview online. Those are some of the things that we have done, kind of focusing on the soft skills, especially in this environment, so that you can turn up and be your best self even in a virtual environment, seeing that more as an advantage rather than a disadvantage.
Thank you. I will move to Mohammed with this question, but there are a number of questions that have come through Slido, and I will address them in a minute. But maybe I will start with, maybe I'll have Mohammed just also talk about this particular question. What kind of opportunities did the pandemic pose for you in terms of your employment programming? And then I will come to the Slido questions. To you, Mohammed.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I'll be very brief on this. I want to say that first thing first, we identified areas where we could pivot and pivot easily. And then we identified areas where we needed to stop providing those services because those were no longer relevant in the new normal or the new environment. So, and the other part of the programs was to identify the migration of programs from online to virtual. As Chidima mentioned, it's a different world out there when you are out on a virtual platform. You may have your comfort zone within your home, but you may not know how to use all the different platforms that are available out there and what are being used. So I think those are some of the things that we tried to create opportunities for newcomers to be able to learn those platforms, acquire those platforms, and then use those platforms. Because even if you have them and you learn them, but if you don't use them, and use them correctly, it's not beneficial. The other thing is we started many programs that were meant for newcomers that were changed or devised in such a way that they were meant for an online environment. So, for example, we had a program called First Steps into the Canadian Workforce. We couldn't provide that anymore because that was a training-based program. Mm-hmm. So instead, we went and took the best pieces of it that could be provided in an online format and called it Skills for the Canadian Workforce, where it was not only instruction-based, but it was also a little more interactive between people who are at home, so that they can also try and be active online, because it's very easy to just not be as interactive if you don't have the chance or the opportunity. We also started calling guest speakers so newcomers could know what their rights and responsibilities were if they were going to work. Right. Or if they were going to accept a job, because sometimes in COVID times it's a very challenging environment to begin with. When people go into work there, and if they don't know their rights and responsibilities, when to say no and when to say yes, so there can be a problem. The last thing I would say is we highly relied on job matching technology and emotional intelligence, and combining both of those. So those things were not being used to identify where are your transferable skills, where do you need to upskill, where do you need to identify advancement in skill acquisition in a certain area that would not be much difficult, and how to transfer your skills online as well. So the whole this has really provided an opportunity for the center, but at the same time, it's sad to see some of the programs that were really working well in person are no longer there.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of us are feeling the pain of that. So there is one question which has been upvoted by a number of people, and it pertains to the conversation we just had. So I want to make sure that we address that before we move on. And this question is from somebody who asks, could you give us an idea on the types of soft skills that employers are looking for based on what you have unpacked? If any one of you would like to start taking it, maybe it is addressed to either Chidima or Daisy, if you would like to start with that, since we talked about soft skills.
I can share some, and I'm sharing this now from my perspective as a worker, like an employee in the company. So I find that one of the soft skills that has really come to the forefront in the midst of the whole pandemic situation is resilience, and the interesting thing about that is that, as an immigrant, when you come into a new country, sometimes you're so focused on getting it right, on proving that you're strong, you can do everything you can be depended on. But resilience really speaks to your ability to be flexible, right? To know when to ask for help, to know when to reach out. It's not about you being strong. That's the one thing I learned during this whole pandemic. Like within my team, within the company where I work with, I see that leaders are celebrating those who are able to understand the value they bring to the table, how much they can do, and when they need help, being able to ask for help. People who are able to lead teams, you know, with the understanding that every individual team member has different perspective or different experience from their home. And just that emotional intelligence part of it, you know, where you're able to see that two people, even though they're the same, they're managers on your team, have different circumstances that impact them. And you're able to adapt, come up with a working situation that fits both experiences. And the interesting thing is that I feel like as immigrants, we do have those skills, because a lot of us have moved from our home countries to a new place. So you've learned how to change, you've learned how to adapt, you've learned how to make things work for you. I feel like this is just a perfect platform to show that you are flexible, you're adaptable, and you have that resilience. You know, it's a very big platform for you to showcase those soft skills that you bring to the table. Another thing that I've seen that has come to light is team building. As simple as it is, we now have virtual teams. People who are used to seeing each other face to face every day now haven't seen each other for going on 9 months now. How are you able to build programs that bring the team together? Make sure that the team is connected, even though everyone is geographically apart. Simple things like organizing like an online game. You'll be surprised how senior leaders are looking for people who like to do things like that, who like to bring everybody together, have everybody celebrate for 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a weekday. Those are the little things I'm seeing that previously were not really talked about, but right now in the midst of this pandemic, they're the celebrated skills that every leader is looking for. So those are just some of the things I have seen personally. Daisy, I'm sure you have some more to share.
Thank you. Daisy, would you?
Sure.
Like to...
Just to add to what Chinema said, I think just before I continue, I think we need to also note that a lot of these soft skills are obviously culturally defined or culturally bound. So how you define, for example, leadership in one country is very different than another. And I think the challenge for employers is to really, as I said, unpack and define what it is what do you value? When you talk about someone who demonstrates strong communication skills, what does that mean? When you talk about someone who demonstrates motivation, what does that mean? Because again, if you come from a country that's very hierarchical, you have to be very mindful around kind of the parameters in which you have an ability to influence or to communicate. So in one country, that may be considered insubordination. In another country or another workplace culture, it's considered a prized trait. So using the example of games, which Chinema talked about, that's a really good example. So, you know, when we talk about team building, we talk, you know, particularly in some sectors, we want to add more fun, we want to add more engagement. But if you come from a country where it's all about work and it's serious, you don't quite understand what is the value of having your coworkers play a game together, you know, online after work day. So it's a lot of like unpacking and really articulating, you know, what is it that you value and how do you define, like, give me concrete examples as a newcomer as to how I can demonstrate those skills to you. And the other thing I do want to talk about, but again, this would be food for another hour conversation, is some of this, quite frankly, is code for bias. Okay, yes. So often it's a motherhood term. Oh, he or she doesn't have the soft skills, but what are you talking about? So just being candid, often, you know, you have to really understand, is it really the soft skills or what is the underlying bias or assumptions that are at play here? So nothing more much to add. I think Chinema covered it nicely.
Thank you. Thank you both, Chinema and Daisy. And what you said, I mean, what Chinema said and I took away was the fact that as immigrants, we all are resilient. You have moved to a country, resiliency is part of what you bring. And in a time like this is an amazing skill to demonstrate. But also something that you spoke about, Daisy, which struck a chord for me. And I've had this conversation and it really is a pet peeve for me when somebody tells me, oh, immigrants don't have soft skills or immigrants don't have the critical skills. And my answer to that has always been, no, know, yes, they do have the soft skills. It's just that what they value as a soft skill is very different from what you value as a soft skill. And their understanding of it may be different, right? And sometimes, as you very rightly said, Daisy, is being clear to articulate that. And I mean, in the last couple of months and years, we've been seeing this trend to move towards competency-based hiring, right? Rather than these generic statements that mean nothing to many people. And so to be really clear about how you articulate your competency. So thank you for sharing that. There's one more question that I just wanted to make sure that I address, just so that we can move on. And somebody asked a question in a previous slide. Daisy mentioned D&I in her slide. Can she explain what D&I refers to? And I think this was diversity and inclusion that you were talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, my apologies for using abbreviation. Actually, yes, it actually refers to diversity and inclusion initiatives. So thank you for asking that question. And my apologies, I shouldn't have assumed that everyone understands the initials.
Thank you. Thank you, Daisy. So now this is a question for, maybe I'll start with you, Ilmaz, because we've heard of some of the initiatives that you have launched and you've shared some of those. What would also help, I think, the audience is to tell us a little bit about what worked and what did not work in your employment programming. So maybe I'll start with you, Ilmaz, from the mentoring program. Are there things that you could share with us?
Definitely. Thank you, Sabina. Let me start with a brief overview of the program in case any audience member is not familiar. So Triac Mentoring Partnership is our flagship program where we match job-ready skilled newcomers with volunteer mentors in their field, where mentors help them to navigate the job market. And usually newcomers and their mentors share a similar professional background. Mentors are established professionals working in companies for several years. Some of them are previous immigrants themselves, so they also understand the challenges that newcomers go through. And being a mentor helps you to really hone your leadership and coaching skills. You also learn from newcomers and their perspectives. You gain knowledge of international business practices and advance your cross-cultural communication skills as newcomers are coming from all around the world. And as we have discussed, they have different soft skills and they have different things to offer. Next slide, please. So within the program, the challenge was really significant. When the lockdown first hit, we saw a 50% decline in the number of new registrations among the mentees in April and May compared to year over year. And our program actually experiences growth as Canada welcomes more newcomers. So this was quite a challenge for the program. Accompanied with this decreasing number of newcomers coming to our community partners to receive mentoring support was the fact that employers, there was also a slowdown in employer cycles. We really rely on our employer partners to encourage their employees to come and sign up to the program as volunteer mentors. And with all the lockdown and uncertainties that we have discussed, this has really slowed down, which led to a decline in new mentor uptakes. We didn't have people coming up and signing and saying, I'm ready to help newcomer professionals navigate the labor market. And this comes at a time where mentoring is even more important. And at the same time, even for existing mentors and mentees, we had to redefine mentorship. What does a virtual mentorship look like? How do you guide and support someone who you have never met in person? How is that different from the regular mentoring model that we had in place? Next slide, please. First of all, to show our program's relevance and to be able to attract newcomers, we really focused on communicating the impact. Recently, Triac Mentoring Partnership was part of an external evaluation that was funded by Employment and Social Development Canada, and the results show that the program participants are around 2.5 times more likely to be in good quality jobs and 4 times more likely to expand their networks compared to people who haven't participated to the program. These are 3-month outcomes. And we really put the message out because this really shows that our program helps, empowers immigrants against precarious work. Our program works, so come to us so that we can help you. So this was on the mentee demand side. On the mentor supply side, we really focused on re-engagement campaigns. It's a difficult time to introduce and onboard a new mentor, but we really went back to our old or big pool of mentors who have volunteered in the program before, and we said, we need you. There are lots of newcomers who feel lost in looking for a job, who need your support. come back to us. Your help is much needed, almost like a frontline worker. At the same time, with the virtual ways of connecting, mentors and mentees came to us with a lot of questions. How do I make a virtual mentoring relationship work? What do I need to do differently? And to be honest, we don't have all the answers. Things are constantly evolving. And as an organization, you don't have all the answers. So what we did was really a two-way process of learning from our mentees and mentors and putting that message out back to those who need it. So basically, we asked our mentors and mentees, what was helpful for you? What did you see as useful in your mentoring relationship? And then we developed content and workshops that helped us to transfer these best practices and learnings so that other mentors and other mentees can benefit from them. We had conversations on social media platforms, for instance, where mentees post questions about their employment situation or challenges they experienced. Our mentors came on board and shared their insights and experiences. So it really drills down to dealing with uncertain situations like this. You have to be flexible. You have to be open to listening, learning from your partners, learning from your stakeholders, and consulting others. So I would say it was a mutual learning process, adapting our processes based on what we are observing and what our stakeholders are observing.
Excellent points there, Ilmaz, and what you said, what we said applies to the immigrants about being flexible and resilient applies to all of us as organizations as well, right? That we need to be nimble quickly. I'm actually going to also ask Mohammed, because you've also had to shift gears very quickly. So what worked and what did not work in some of the programming that you did?
So Sabina, I think one of the things that we have learned over the pandemic is we are building as we are flying the plane. That's a metaphor that I use quite a lot because we are still learning things as we go on of what are the best type of times to use. What is the vocabulary we use? Because when you're online, you're not in person. When somebody doesn't understand something on the other end,
right,
they are quite shy to begin with. In person, online it increases further. So those are some of the things that we have to be very careful in how we approach the subject matter and how we provide that. So other than that, we have seen an uptick in the number of people accessing services. Unlike at Triac, we actually saw more people because more people had more time on their hands to access the services. So another thing that we have learned is by providing content after the fact, after the program is done. So now we have content that we have developed that can be shared after the fact. And we have gone to different social media platforms. We have also shared that in various different modes. We are also, as we speak, we are looking at identifying programs like podcasts, a podcast around some of the programs that we provide. So it is available whether you're in your car or you're sitting in front of a computer. So a lot of innovation happening, but again, as I said, putting the puzzle together is sometimes you don't want to crash too fast, so you don't want to fly too high because the chances of crashing is also very real.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the audience will relate to that. I think many of us run our programs, right? You build the plane as you fly, because that has been the story for many of us in the sector. But thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to just do one last question before we turn it over to audience questions. And this question is for you, Chidima. So this is specifically from your perspective as an immigrant. So when you took the Business Edge program, I used to call you the networking queen. But over the years, as I got to know you better, I realized that you actually take it a step further. You build very strong relationships. And one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of newcomers is, oh, everything is virtual. How do I network? How do I build relationships? How do I do this? And I know that in the, during this COVID times, you've had some amazing stories to share from this period. So tell us, how do you do this?
Okay, so I'll first start with a caveat, Sabina, that I think that before COVID, I actually did have a phobia for networking, because just breaking that awkward silence of reaching out to somebody that you didn't know, for me, it was a big thing. And I kind of had to figure out my way to navigate through that. But the interesting thing is that COVID actually came with a silver lining for me in the aspect of networking, because I seem to be having a much more pleasant experience and a much more fruitful and successful experience in COVID than I had prior to COVID. But the one thing, and a couple of things, I say this too with the caveat that this is my personal story, so it might not work for everybody, but I will share the things that have worked for me that has tried. So one thing I did, first of all, at the beginning of the pandemic, was to realize that the same way I felt like my world was falling apart, like the kids were at home, I had to figure out how to work with the kids at home and do the online learning. I realized that every other person in my network was also going through the same thing. Yes. So I made a deliberate choice, at that point, to start reaching out to those who had helped me, to those who I considered as mentors, those who I thought could be strategic contacts for me at work. And I was reaching out to them with a specific question: how are you coping with COVID? And it's interesting how just having that personal question, just people actually just open up, male, females, and they're like, oh my God, I'm going crazy with the kids. And then you begin to see that you're all the same. It just opens the platform for you to have like an honest and open conversation with people. And for me, that's what really worked, because as I'm conversing with them, I also get the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, I was actually looking to, get a new role, because I'm looking for something better. And because I feel like right now, the whole situation makes everybody connect more with their human. That's what I feel 2020 has done. Like COVID made all of us stop and just connect with who we were as people. And I find that people are more open to connecting. People are more open to genuinely helping others. And that has been my personal experience. I reach out to people and I got connections, like I got referrals to say, oh, speak to this person. This person can provide you more insight, as to your next job role. And I did. It's interesting how I met with people, sometimes at unconventional times. So I like what you said before about flexibility. There are times when I'd fixed, to have a chat with someone, and maybe we were supposed to meet at noon, and the person messages me. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't meet right now. Things are going crazy. Can we meet at 7 p.m.? I have also had to realize that, look, everybody's situation is different. People are at home. They're trying to navigate life and work and everything at the same time. So I also have to be flexible. Like you can't expect to stick to certain timelines. Like I have personally had to be flexible. I've met people at 7 a.m. in the morning for a chat.
Yes.
I've met people at 7 p.m. in the evening for a chat. So you kind of have to figure out what works between you and the person. And genuinely just make a connection, invest the time to have real conversation with people, because then it's not like an economic relationship anymore, but it becomes more of a personal relationship. And I feel like COVID, this whole lockdown is really giving us that opportunity to dig deep, and create those bonds that we can leverage on as we build our network. And the other thing too, I would say, is give back. Sometimes as immigrants, you're looking to connect with someone because you're trying to get a job, you're trying to get a new role. But also take a step back and ask yourself, what can I bring to this relationship? Which is something that I've done. So while I have conversations with people that I'm hoping to get a job within their role, I'm also I'm listening to what they're telling me about the problems they're having or what the challenges they're having. And I'm asking myself, how can I give back to this person? How can I help this person? And I've done simple things like a VP I spoke with, I noticed that she had a passion, for a certain non-for-profit, and she had made a post, on LinkedIn, about trying to raise funds for those people. And I said, you know what, I might not be able to help her like on the job, but I can at least share this initiative she's driving with my network. And I did, and it got such a rousing response. And she called me back like 1 week. I was like, wow, I didn't know you did that. And I'm really so happy that I was able to raise some funds for her. Well, not directly from my purse, but just by sharing it with my network. Those are the little things that you can do that can also help you expand your network. and make it, easier for you to have those conversations that you need to have. And you don't necessarily need to have a job. Like right now, we all have the time. Think about what can you give to that person too? How can you support that person as much as you're expecting that person, to support you? So those are some of the things I have done personally that helped me during this time. And you know what, during this period, like you rightly know, I was able to reach out within my network, and I got 3 job roles within the company where I work with. This has never happened. I've been with them for 3 years, and I've been trying to move, and I didn't until this time. But it also brings up something that Daisy said when she was speaking, that right now with the pandemic, we see that there is a lot of internal, there's opportunity for internal movement, because whereas employers might not be recruiting from the outside, I think that immigrants who have jobs also have an opportunity right now, to move within roles, to change their job roles. And maybe you're in a role where you feel you're underemployed. You actually do have the opportunity right now, with the current situation, to look for something new. But you have to be strategic about it. You have to plan it, and you have to reach out. You have to reach out and make those connections.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chidima. Great advice there. I think the one that I like best is the pandemic actually allows all of us to be human, right? We no longer always have to wear that professional hat that we think that we have to wear. So thank you for sharing that story. So I'm actually going to move on. We are at 4 p.m. to answer some of the questions from the Slido. And this first question is probably predominantly for Daisy, but Mohammed and Ilmaz, feel free to chime in as well. Are you hearing from employers that the pandemic has highlighted they don't need a local labor force and workers can live elsewhere, in or out of Canada? Oh, it's in or out of Canada, not even the city, but sure. Daisy or Mohammed, anybody's hearing that?
Just so I understand, the question is, are we hearing from employers that they actually don't need local workers? Is that what you're saying?
No, that they're willing to hire from anywhere else in the world. The question was specifically in or out of Canada, but are you even hearing that? Are they willing to hire out of the province? So you can live in Vancouver but work in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So basically what you're talking about, remote working. Yeah, for sure. In fact, we just hired somebody and she lives in GTA and she's working with us remotely. So absolutely what this has done is actually it's highlighted, and it's interesting that you asked that. When we asked our employer advisory group how they responded, and they've also, quite a few of them said, it's actually made them rethink work environments and what are the necessary conditions for optimum work. And many folks that hadn't normally considered moving to kind of a remote working culture are actually thinking about doing that on a permanent basis, so post COVID-19. So what we're hearing from employers that actually they can adapt and they can pivot much more quickly than they thought. And I'll give you a perfect example. I used to work for federal government, so if any of you who did, you understand. So 70% of the federal government, at least previously, are working remotely. But you have to understand there was a time that within federal government, you couldn't even access email outside of work. I mean, it was BlackBerry days. So any of you who've worked with federal government know that it takes a long time for innovation on a technology basis to happen, and that's no disregard. I mean, there's all kinds of protocols and safety they have to make sure. But that's a perfect example. We're hearing from employers, those that were actually looking as a temporary are actually looking at potentially permanent. So giving up their office spaces, and they're also rethinking remote working in terms of diversity and inclusion. How does that allow them to better accommodate folks that have different interests, different responsibilities, different capabilities? So they're actually, what's fun, the positive things, they're actually looking to how they can embed this into their hiring policies and practices. So that's a very good thing.
Excellent, thank you. Ilmaz or Mohammed, did you want to chime in on this question?
Sure, I'll chime in. One of the things what we have seen in the Atlantic in the Atlantic region is a lot of benefit because of remote working. Many people who wanted to live in this part of the world but could not now have had the opportunity, and this is because the infrastructure has been created and infrastructure is there now. Or I always believe that. Infrastructure is developed based on innovation happens because of need, and I think as companies, as many companies in larger centers, eliminate office space or make office space optional, we will see more and more of this trend post-COVID as well.
Thank you. And then we can all sell our houses in the big cities and move to some of the smaller towns with a lot more space, which would be amazing. I don't know if any of you specifically have an answer, but I definitely want to address it because a number of people have upvoted it. And the question is, given these labor market challenges for newcomers, would you encourage them towards self-employment instead? What are the pros and cons for them at this time? Would any of you be able to address that?
I can start. The short answer is it really depends. I don't think the self-employment is the panacea to, if you are unable to find paid employment, self-employment may not be a sustainable answer. I think it's really important to differentiate what self-employment is. Are you starting in your own business, leveraging your own skill sets in an area where your expertise and knowledge or networks are relevant and valuable? Or, is this something that you are doing just to, make ends meet? And if it's the latter, it's really important that you build the capacity and networks and make sure that you are connected with an opportunity, whether paid or not, that leverages your skill set. Because the longer you stay, whether it's paid employment or self-employment in a position where you are not using the expertise, the more difficult, the more challenging it becomes to join the labor market, or even even in entrepreneurship, it's important to rely on your assets and knowledge assets in particular. I think for immigrants, it's also difficult to immediately jump on self-employment because in the end, you need networks, you need people that you have to, you need people that need your skills, need your expertise, and those kind of connections are not that easy to build. For instance, one of the most commonly cited studies is immigrants are more likely to start their own business compared to people born in Canada, which is correct. But that effect is observed after spending several years in Canada and not necessarily for newcomers. So it's really important to take that into account when you are considering different alternatives. Are my skills relevant? Is this something that I want to do temporarily and then change my career path? And what will be the effects on your in your career in the longer term?
And thank you for sharing that, because one of the things in my program that we very often see is people who have chosen the self-employment route and they come back and they say, my challenge is I have a great product, but I'm not connecting with the market, because it really then comes down to that very elusive networking, soft skills, all of that helps you build relationships. And sometimes it is good to at least start somewhere and establish those relationships before you move into self-employment. But I know that it is a dream, and I see that over and over in my program. It's a dream for every newcomer, becoming self-employed and managing your own business, because it just takes away some of the pain that you sometimes have to go through because of cultural differences. So thank you for sharing that. Daisy, did you want to jump in on this question?
The only thing I just want to add to is that we're finding on the flip side, I'm not sure what the motivation is, but what we're finding is more and more newcomers are actually open to the gig, what we call the gig economy. So again, working, and you're right, to some degree, that's a product of choice, because maybe they want the flexibility in terms of family or other commitments. There's also a lot more opportunity in the tech sector to work in the gig economy. So we are seeing an increased interest in, from hearing on the ground from newcomers, interest in being part of the gig economy. And employers also looking more to perhaps hire folks on more of a contract basis. So it's kind of a gift and shadow. On one hand, it gives you an opportunity to get in the door, but on the other hand, as Ilma says, in terms of sustainability, sometimes it's feast or famine. Yeah. But whatever the motivations, we're definitely seeing an increase in folks looking at the gig economy.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is specifically for you, Ilmaz. Could you please shed some more light on the re-engagement of mentors?
Yeah, for sure. So, initially when the outbreak happened, most of us faced challenges in terms of, job stability. Will I be employed tomorrow? Will my employer, be fine with all the economic uncertainty? Will I be keeping my job? And that inevitably, affects your capacity or your ability to think about giving back or volunteering. if your job is stable and, if you have strong networks, if you feel secure, then yes, you can think about giving back. But if these factors are absent, then, your capacity to mentor and give back is limited. So, when we were doing the re-engagement campaign, we really wanted to reach out to the groups that feel ready to give back. You might be an established immigrant here, you might be fine with your job, you may be working in a sector that was not that much affected from COVID, although with the things that are going, I don't know if that will be a fact anymore, but we really wanted to reach those mentors who were ready to give back. And as I said, these people have already had the experience of mentoring before. And this is actually something that's really valuable to us, because most of our mentors keep coming back. They see the value of helping a newcomer navigate the job market, and they enhance their own cross-cultural communication skills, and they empower a person in their career journey. So it's really about highlighting that, that we need you to step up, give back. If you can, if you are willing and able to do so, these newcomers could really, really benefit from that.
Thank you for that, Almazi. And I want to address the next question, and anybody feel free to jump in and answer this. What about the most vulnerable newcomers that are not bilingual, low computer literacy, and illiterate in their own language? How can we support them? Thoughts, ideas? Mohammed, would you like to start with this?
Sure. I feel that this is one of the things that we faced right away when either many newcomers who were low skilled did not have a computer, or even if they had a computer, they did not know how to use it effectively to access programming. So I think instead of trying to teach them computer skills, I think providing them pen and paper first, the phone. We also have been doing home visits via WhatsApp.
Nice.
So that's a technology on your smartphone. Everybody has a smartphone, so it has worked effectively, and it can work very effectively in the employment world as well, especially for low-skilled jobs.
So I'm sure a lot of people are very curious now. Tell us a little bit more about the home visits by WhatsApp. What does that mean? What are you supporting them with?
So basically, the home visits are when we go for identifying challenges. They used to be once a week. Our newcomer settlement advisory team would go into the homes of newcomers through a community connections program,
Okay.
identify some of the challenges, and then connect them. As part of this, we also do skills evaluation processes,
Sure.
and we have connected many newcomers to farming, roofing, in very technical, hands-on technical, non-technical rather, hands-on non-technical skills in which they can benefit from. It is obviously a challenge during the pandemic times, but at least being able to provide that option is always an opportunity that they would not have otherwise of being connected.
Thank you. Thank you for. Yes, Daisy.
May I just weigh in briefly just from the employer
Yeah.
side of that in terms of that question? So actually, what we're finding is that employers, particularly small and medium that really need workers, are like implementing some pretty cool, innovative, and not so high-tech solutions to employ lower skilled, lower language levels. So a couple examples is that we know a few employers actually allow for Google Translate on the workplace. Mm-hmm. Another approach is they're creating pods. So they'll have a bilingual speaker with a small group of folks whose language levels are lower to actually help orient them to make sure that all the safety information, the critical information they need is translated, and they support their little pod for a period of time. So again, that's at no cost to the employer, but it's also, leveraging the resources that they have. So the pod scenario has worked. Google Translate has worked. So I just think there's, and also another employer brings in someone to do language training on the job during the break. So there's small ways. So it's not only like, I just want to really ensure that we balance the perspective, because obviously the onus is on the newcomer as the employee, but there's also a responsibility of the employer to look at how they can best utilize and leverage the talent. So sometimes those little small accommodations can make all the difference between not only hire, but also retaining newcomers. And as I said, for lower skill, lower language level, there's some small things that employers have been doing that don't cost them a lot of money, but can reap dividends in the long run.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for those ideas that you shared that employers are actually putting into place, and then we can, address the skills shortage in many ways, because sometimes, very often, language becomes the big reason for the barrier, right? And excellent. So thank you for that. We have just about a minute, so I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you. Thank you for being here today and sharing your thoughts about how the COVID has impacted many communities, but also some of the programming that you're doing to build better and to serve the community better. Thank you all for your time.